Just as a little reminder, this is, in fact, our main protagonist. Just kind of felt like throwing that out there. We opened this week with a cold opener that once again spoiled stuff that we'll just see later in the episode, so let's just move on. The episode proper opened with Doremi complaining about working at the Mahojo during the summer. Honestly, I have to agree with the Toad here. It's really not worth it, especially after 15 years and all those repair bills start to accumulate. Yes, I'm speaking from experience. However, all of her complaints seem to act as a bit of a summoning ritual for a certain hammy merchant who they could tell was coming because they could actually hear her music play. However, she wasn't there to sell them amenities, but rather was delivering something from the Motas. Yeah, a nice little bit of world building that we'll see a lot more throughout this episode. She handed over witch apprentice certificates for all 3 of the Ojamajo now that they had reached the 6th rank. Basically, they would act as a means of keeping track of their apprenticeship progress, with each sphere representing the number of tests they had passed. Just ignore the fact that they kind of barely scurried past a couple of their tests. Doremi went to deliver the certificates to her friends, starting with Hazuki, but got by instead, and oh wow, that is a face. The old maid told her that she was still at the school as it was pool day, a little detail Doremi forgot about and probably could have used during the hot summer. But Aiko and Hazuki were still at the school, helping one of their friends, Kanai Ida, conquer the chin-up bars. Unfortunately, a slip-up ended up dropping her on her foot and she twisted it. It wasn't a serious injury, but the Ojamajo still needed to help her get home, especially since her mother couldn't pick her up because... Kid, you really shouldn't be able to say all of that with a straight face. Like seriously, out of nowhere, we were getting some pretty heavy stuff with Kanai just casually admitting that her mother was in a car accident. I mean, geez, could someone lighten the mood a little? Okay, thank you for that, Doremi. But, you know, it's at times like these that you're pretty much confirming Nobuko's interpretation of you. Then again, all the dogs we've owned weren't moochers like this greedy little witch. They arrived at Kanai's home, but just as they walked in, Doremi heard the faint call of a cat. Kanai said that they didn't own any felines, but they did own a really creepy looking Maneki Neko statue. After watching the film version of As the Gods Will, I am never keeping one of those in my home ever again, along with Dharma's. Like the rest of his family, Mr. Ida had also experienced some misfortune. And this is all on top of a thief having broken into their restaurant 10 days earlier and seemingly scaring away their customers as a result. Thus, Doremi, totally out of the kindness of her heart, volunteered herself and her friends to help. Yeah, Aiko's face here speaks volumes. Of course, they also had to convince Masharika to give them the day off from their regular child labor law breaking job. Fortunately, the newest Ojamajo had them covered. Okay, I know I keep making these simp jokes when it comes to Pop's entourage, but did this show seriously predict the e-girl culture? With that, they were able to work at the steakhouse, but for some reason, customers just didn't want to go in. But are your social distancing protocols up to code? Say, how much longer can we do these jokes? Actually, this lady said that she felt an unnatural presence in the restaurant that made her uncomfortable. This of course matched up with Doremi's earlier unease, who in a good bit of detective work suggested that they further examine the restaurant. Predictably, the unease was coming from the Maneki Neko. Aiko tried to calm her friends down, but... too obvious. And as it turned out, the Idas just so happened to receive this unbreakable kitty 10 days earlier, the same day as the break-in, and the star of their misfortunes. Of course, the Ojamajo decided to go to the shop where they got it from, and apparently the owner of that shop had gotten it from a company that went bankrupt, and just as soon as he gave it away, his business picked up. A few days later, this gentleman was never heard from again. Seriously, this is like the opening to every Mafia movie ever. And let's be honest, he kind of deserved it for not telling Mr. Ida that statue might be a little cursed. Anyway, they convinced him to let them take it and hopefully get it exorcised. With that, they turned to the experts at the Mahodo, where as it just so happened, Della was there to collect some payments as Pop Simps managed to clean out the store. I truly fear for these boys' futures. Anyway, Della immediately recognized the slightly more evil Kitty, and for once showed a side of herself that wasn't just a money-grubbing charlatan, and offered to have it examined. At the same time, the fairies, whom I think we haven't actually seen in quite a while, arrived to inform the Ojamajo that the steakhouse was suddenly getting a flood of business. Let me guess, did angry British guy go there and whip things back into shape? With that, the restaurant managed to live another day, though the waitresses didn't get any leftovers. Later, they got a direct invitation to meet with the Witch Queen that again was spoiled because of that pointless cold opener. Anyway, she explained that the Maneki Neko was what they referred to as a bad item, a remnant of an evil warlock whose actions resulted in the human and witch's worlds breaking ties with each other after peacefully coexisting a long time ago. Whereas part of it all is that receipts didn't exist back then, so the return process was even more fruitless than it is now. Nah, but seriously, this is some fascinating and much appreciated world building for this show that was imparted to us fairly organically by first showing us the effects of a bad item, and then kind of related it back to some real life historical events that I probably can't talk about on this platform. Anyway, the source of the bad item's powers came from the bad cards inside of them that would make the opposite of the owner's wishes come true. Trusting that the Ojamajo would deal with them properly, the queen infused their new certificates with pure light energy that would let them exorcise the cards out. With that, they managed to remove the Maneki Neko's card that was not of any sort of rectangular shape, so I'm not really sure if you should call that a card. And from there, the queen had them stored in some very outdated product placement. Seriously, I remember my sister having like about a dozen of those educational full computer things. The queen tasked them with filling up the Pokedex, collecting all the remaining bad cards in the human world. With that, the episode ended with the Ida family's fortunes completely reversing back to normality, and yet for whatever reason, they decided to keep the Maneki Neko. I know it's not cursed anymore, but if it were me, I would take a hammer to that hunk of plaster. This was a great world-building episode. It effectively shook up the status quo, which could lead to some great conflicts for our heroines on down the line, but at the same time, it still maintained its good, easygoing comedy that we've all gotten used to. After the events of the Majiruka arc, it's great to see that this show is maintaining an escalating conflict. After all, the snake oil selling witch introduced the concept of magic that could result in severe misfortune, which these bad items are going to provide much more of. And while Majiruka was just a jerk selling defective products, the warlock who created the bad cards seemed to be a vindictive monster who destroyed relationships between two worlds. That's good setup for a much larger scale conflict that the Ojamajo might have to deal with on down the line. Obviously, they shouldn't have to deal with it just yet, as they're still just rank 6 witches, but this collection mechanic they just introduced with the bad cards can act as a good build up to that. For now though, we're still getting some of the fun slice of life stuff, like Doremi being a non-traditionally kind of scummy protagonist who drags her friends into her scheme, and said friends reacting appropriately. Seriously, Aiko had some great faces in this one. And yet, thankfully, these characters didn't come off as just one-note gags, as Doremi, and even Della, knew when to treat the situation seriously. All in all, this was a strong world-building episode with even some good character moments and comedy thrown in. I look forward to seeing these witches try to catch them all. However, now that we're about halfway through the series, I think it's time for a little change-up. I've heard theories that the upcoming Tropical Rouge Precure might end up being more of a gag season like Smile, as much like that season, it's going to start airing right after a year that went through a huge real-world disaster. And while Doremi certainly does comedy well, as I even pointed out in this episode, I think we should take a look at a show that was meant to be entirely an affectionate parody of the magical girl genre. Don't worry, we'll still cover Ojamajo Doremi, just now with an alternating schedule. With that in mind, farewell for now, my friends, and as for what series we're going to start covering next week, well, here's a hint.